It is a crucial time of the fantasy football season where you're starting to look at the playoff picture. The records are starting to matter. The points for are starting to matter. So we are going to help you set your lineups for week 8 of the NFL season. 24 different players who could influence the outcome of your week 8 matchup to put you over the top. We're going to talk about starts and sits at every single position. And let's start with the quarterbacks here, fellas. Cameron, who is your quarterback start of the week?
Kirk Chains, and it's pretty simple. He's playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The last time he played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he threw for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. Last week, the Bucs gave up 280 passing yards and 5 touchdowns to Lamar Jackson. And now the Buccaneers don't have Godwin or Mike Evans. They're going to be, it's going to be quick possessions for the Bucs, giving the ball back to the Falcons, who will be able to just move the ball up and down the field on this defense that just really hasn't stopped anyone all year of the past. I just think that right now you have very select games that you can play Kirk Cousins in. If he's on your bench, if you need a guy to fill in, right, you have Jaden Daniels, who might be missing this week. This is where you'd go pick up Kirk Cousins in a plus matchup, and this is one of the few weeks that I am willing to start Kirk Cousins.
My issue with Kirk Cousins this week is that I don't want us to sit and look at 500 yards a few weeks back and say, yep, start him up. Same thing this week. Now I know, again, you had Lamar last week who absolutely tore him up as well. I mean, this is a secondary you can throw on, but my worry is that the Bucs aren't going to be able to generate enough offense where you might actually see heavy involvement of Tyler Algier, of Bijan Robinson in their game plan this week. Ty, where do you stand on Kirk Cousins?
I kind of side with you on it just because like there is the reality that like Atlanta gets up super early and they don't need Kirk. They don't need Drake London. They don't need any of the other weapons to really contribute. And that, like you said, they're going to rely on the run game, but I also kind of see them going to Kirk Cousins to kind of get him back on a good streak, just because last week against Seattle was bad enough that he got, I shouldn't say he got pulled, but they didn't see the need in keeping him in the game, and they gave Michael Penix the last little bit of snaps for the game. So I'm kind of torn on Atlanta this week just because obviously the matchup is great, but it's one of those like they either get up super early and they just don't need their guys to really step up, or they do rely on them.
The statistical argument is 100% favoring Cameron, obviously, when Tampa is allowing the second most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this year, the third most passing yards to quarterbacks. They've allowed 11 passing touchdowns on the year. Like, the argument is 100% there statistically, where Kirk Cousins should be a statistically good play this week. So I don't think you can go wrong with him as a streamer this week. Where I place him in terms of like a top 12 quarterback, that I'm not quite entirely sure about. So I don't want us to just sit here and think he threw for 500 yards, that he's going to throw for 350 and 3 on Sunday. He might, but my worry is that the Bucs just won't have enough firepower to keep up with this Atlanta Falcons offense. Any kind of a bow you want to put on Kirk Cousins, Cameron?
Yeah, I don't know. I just worry that we see it and then we go, oh, can't happen again. But just the way that this Bucs defense has been, they've given up points to everybody. They gave up 18 to Bo Nix. They gave 18 to Jalen Hurts. They gave up 42 to Kirk Cousins. They gave up 44 to Lamar Jackson. They gave up 27 to Jaden Daniels. Obviously, most of those guys, except for Bo Nix, are really good quarterbacks. So, okay, I mean, Bo Nix has been good. He's been good for a rookie.
He's been better. Bo Nix has been better.
He's been better than Mahomes.
Oh, yeah. Stop. Oh, get this guy off the podcast. Oh, my God.
I mean, but
what are we, fantasy box score hunters? Jeez.
Oh, wow.
They've just been bleeding points. And like last week, Lamar had 44. Obviously, he had 9 for 52 on the ground. You're not getting that from Kirk.
Right.
But he only threw the ball 22 times. And he still scored 44 points. So, I mean, I don't think they have to throw a lot to put up points against this Bucs defense.
Which is entirely fair. If they find the end zone through the air, Kirk Cousins will have himself a good day against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. Ty, I'll kick it back to you here now. Who's your quarterback start of the week?
Tua. Yep. If he's playing, you should fire him up this week going up against Arizona. Arizona is still allowing the 4th highest passing yards per game after getting embarrassed by Washington in week 4. So they have been playing a little bit better on defense. Like they just beat the Chargers on Monday Night Football, but they are still kind of bleeding yards in the passing game. They are also allowing the 7th most passing touchdowns to quarterbacks as well on the year. And they're also 3rd in EPA per dropback. This is just a smash matchup for Tua. This is a great matchup for him to come back to. And when you've got your number 1 wide receiver pretty much like telling people in his media availability, like, start me up, like, strike up the bleeping band, like, all signs point to Miami kind of getting back to where they were, where they were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I love Tua this week. If your league mates dropped him, hopefully you picked him up on waivers this week, because I agree with you. This is a smash start for Tua Tagovailoa. Cameron, what about you? Where do you stand on Tua this week?
Yeah, and they have to win. The Dolphins do. They're 2-4 right now. If they want to make the playoffs this year, they need a statement and win this week. You got to imagine Arizona's looking to turn it around. They haven't been very good, and even if they're not, I gotta imagine, even if Miami gets up early, they're gonna go and look to put up as many points as they possibly can, and just announce to the league, we're back. I don't care how bad Arizona plays on offense. I think they're gonna put up a lot of points. So yeah, I like Tua in this one for sure.
Yeah, the point total in this game only set at 46.5, but this is a game where I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a little bit of fireworks here if Tua Tagovailoa truly regains control of this offense and doesn't miss a beat from where he was earlier in the season. My quarterback start of the week, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. Prior going into the Week 7 bye week, he was red hot. The quarterback 6 and the quarterback 1 before their bye week. He had thrown 6 touchdowns to 1 interception in those 2 weeks. You look at the Commanders, they've been better against quarterbacks recently, but that's until you look at they've played Deshaun Watson and Andy Dalton in 2 of their last 3 matchups. Lamar Jackson cooked the Washington Commanders for 323 passing yards in week 6. So you have Caleb Williams, who threw for 300 plus back in week 5. He was on fire against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am very willing to start Caleb Williams this week in what I think is a plus matchup for him.
Yeah, he's really shown that he's, grown as a passer the last 4 weeks, 19, 11, 23, 29. Obviously, good matchups. Indianapolis, Rams, Carolina, Jacksonville. But like you said, Washington is another good matchup. Yeah. So if he's been exploiting good matchups and he's got another one here, I definitely am for sure okay with firing up Caleb Williams. And we've talked about it in the past. That rushing upside helps. Only 1 game with with less than 4 carries. So he's got a little rushing base to add to, what we've seen from him passing the ball.
Yeah. I just think Caleb Williams is starting to figure it out as an NFL quarterback. I know there's concerns off the bat, but once you get him into a few good matchups, let the game come to him a little bit more. This is a kid who's really starting to figure it out. Ty, where are you at on Caleb Williams this week?
I see this one very similar to Kirk in the sense that, like, if Jaden Daniels doesn't play for Washington, Chicago could really get ahead quick just because their defense is much better than Atlanta's. That being said, though, the statistics that you can look at for this matchup for Caleb also point to him as, being a great fantasy option this week in a plus matchup. Washington 6th in EPA per dropback. So yet another kind of leaky defense that isn't exactly shutting people down. They're just winning because of their offense right now. I'm more okay with Caleb than I am with Kirk this week. But that being said, there are worse streaming options than Caleb this week.
Before we keep moving here, we need to go out there and talk to those of you who are part of the 93%. The 93% of you who consume our content but aren't yet subscribed. Would love if you are willing to consider changing that quick. You can hit that subscribe button. I promise you will love this channel. If you love fantasy football, we are posting 3 times a week. And if you want even more fantasy football content, you can follow our shorts channel as well. But on this channel specifically, we would appreciate your support, considering the vast majority of you are consuming our content and have not yet subscribed. So we appreciate those of you who are a part of the fellowship already. I would appreciate if you consider joining. We think it will be a good return on your investment. It's just 1 click. It doesn't even cost that much. It's a brilliant return on your investment. Who am I kidding? Let's move on to the quarterback sits here, fellas. Cameron, who's your quarterback sit of the week?
It's Geno Smith, and I honestly feel kind of silly saying it because Geno's been awesome this year. He's kind of returned to what we saw in 2022, where he played into that big contract, but he's playing in the Bills, and the Bills are yet to give up over 2 passing touchdowns in a game so far. They've only given up 225 passing yards twice so far this season, and then you add on top of that, DK Metcalf is being considered week to week right now. Maybe he plays, right? I'm not going to doubt DK Metcalf on playing through an injury, but even if he does playing through an MCL sprain, he's not necessarily going to be 100% this week. And when your field stretcher isn't exactly 100%, that tends to hurt your offense, especially against great pass defense. But for me, what really does it is how bad this Bills defense has been against the run and how awesome Kenneth Walker has been. I know that, Geno's thrown the ball more than anybody else in the NFL, but if you're the Seattle, team and the pass is going to struggle a little bit and Kenneth Walker is going to run all over this team, it's going to be hard for me to see Geno really lighten up the score sheet when you can just give it to Kenneth Walker for 6 yards per carry against this defense. So I'm going to sit Geno, cautiously. If you have Geno, you probably got another quarterback you can pivot to. And so I'd pivot this week.
Yeah, Geno is a pivotable quarterback. I think that's a really good way of putting it. And you even look at again, without DK Metcalf, it has largely been DK Metcalf in the receiver room this year. JSN hasn't quite taken that leap that we had hoped for. He's actually running less yards per route than he did his rookie season, which is
so gross.
Slightly alarming when we thought, he'd be taking a step forward in Ryan Grubb's offense this year. Are you with Cameron here, Ty? Are you okay pivoting off of Geno this week?
Yeah, I'm okay looking elsewhere. I think the range of outcomes, right, for how great some of his games have been, we are probably going to see something similar to what we saw against San Francisco, where he still finished with 300 yards, but he threw 2 picks, right? So turnovers involved may kind of negate how many, passing yards he could rack up if they're playing from behind and all those kind of things. And again, it's the matchup too. Like the matchup just does not play into Geno's favor, especially with the wide receiver room the way it is right now.
I'm going to come right back to you, Ty. Let's talk about your quarterback sit of the week, who we talked about on Tuesday's episode. I don't think we'll spend 15 minutes talking about him on this episode, but you're backing up your talk from earlier this week.
Yep, we're keeping the hate train going here. Patrick Mahomes, real quick, just shameless plug. If you did not watch that 15-minute segment on Mahomes earlier this week, go check it out. It's phenomenal. Anyway, I think people may be intrigued with Mahomes this week just because they went out and just got DeAndre Hopkins earlier this morning, the day that we are recording on Wednesday. So I'm just not convinced that DeAndre Hopkins is playing because we're already halfway through the week. I want to use Amari Cooper as an example here. Amari Cooper was traded to Buffalo on Monday the 15th, and he played just 35% of snaps the following Sunday. So low-key, a miracle that the guy finished as the wide receiver 14 on the week. But the point is, if Amari Cooper had a full week of preparation and only played 35% of snaps, how much is D-Hop really going to play in this one? So with the lack of weapons, then I'm also expecting a very heavy run game script just going up against Vegas that have not stopped the run at all this year. We need to wait one more week to really kind of have any kind of hope for Mahomes.
I think this is a conversation we're going to have next week again on. We don't even have an episode dedicated to it. But the thing that's going to be interesting with this DeAndre Hopkins acquisition is where does he actually fit in on the football field? But we're not going to break into that because I do agree with you. I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be very limited if he does play this week. And I do agree with you that this, to me, has Kareem Hunt written all over it in this game. Are you in the same boat here, Cameron?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Ugh.
What
yeah, wow. That was brutal. That's just how I am. But Kansas City's shown they want to win games ugly. They're not looking to be, hey, we're 100. We're gonna just light you up through the air. If they can run it 27 times on you, they're gonna run it 27 times on you with Kareem Hunt, and I think that's exactly what they're gonna do because that's what Vegas leaks. And they got beat by Vegas last year, so I think they're gonna make sure, hey, we're gonna just stick to what's been working and make sure we just walk out of here with a win this week.
My quarterback sit of the week is also a guy you invested early in your fantasy football drafts. And honestly, you've probably been sitting him already, but this is a healthy reminder to you all that if you haven't dropped Anthony Richardson already, this is your time to sit him this week. You just cannot trust him, like at all, period. He, yes, put up 27 fantasy points against Houston in week 1. That's who he draws here again in week 8. But since that game, he has yet to finish higher than the quarterback 21. He has given you less than 9 fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. From an NFL perspective, again, we talked about this earlier in the week. From an NFL perspective, these reps are good for Anthony Richardson. This is a guy that needs to develop, that needs the game experience to actually figure out how his talents translate. But the problem is that it's terrible for fantasy football. You just can't trust him right now. So I think Anthony Richardson starting from the Indianapolis Colts, is the right decision for their long-term future, but for your fantasy football team, it is absolutely the wrong decision. So I'm perfectly fine sending Anthony Richardson this week once again.
Yeah, he's a running back who throws the ball sometimes at this point. Last week, he had 8.8 fantasy points. 5.6 of those came from running the ball, which means he had 3.2 points from passing. These are all the quarterbacks. I'm just going to list them real quick. The quarterbacks who had more points from passing the ball than Anthony Richardson did last week. Tim Boyle, Deshaun Watson, Jake Hayner, Dorian. No, actually, no, he didn't. Daniel Jones did, though.
Because how dare Dorian Thompson-Robinson have that?
So, yeah, it's brutal, right? I mean, if Jake Hayner has more points from passing the ball than you do on a week and you played the full game, there's something going on there. So, yeah, I'm pivoting off Anthony Richardson.
I kind of want to just transition to running backs off of that. Not to cut you off, but that's like the epitome of Anthony.
Ty doesn't want to talk about it anyways, so you're fine.
I'll say, yeah, Ty's in shambles. He's in disbelief.
I plead the fifth on this one.
He's just, he is facing his palms. It's tough to be an Anthony Richardson truther right now. Let's flip the script. Let's get positive again. Let's talk about our running back starts of the week here, fellas. Cameron, I know you just delivered some terrible news on Anthony Richardson. Why don't you go ahead, deliver some good news on your running back start of the week?
Yeah, it's Jordan Mason. And again, we talked about him earlier in the week, and we were all kind of down on him. But the fact that we knew Ayuk was going to be out, but now Debo most likely out. If he does play, he's coming off pneumonia earlier this week. I don't know if you've ever had pneumonia, but you're not exactly NFL ready by the end of the week if you have. So I'm not expecting a big game from him. They have to rely on running the ball here. And the good thing for them is Dallas has given up the 3rd most points to running backs. So they've held 3 teams under 80 yards this season at the running back position. It was Pittsburgh with Najee Harris before he, stopped jumping over people. Cleveland, who has Deshaun Watson, and the Giants, who have Daniel Jones. The 3 decent teams they've played who have run for over 150 yards against them are the Saints with Kamara, the Ravens with Derrick Henry, and the Lions with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I got to be honest, Jordan Mason in the San Francisco offense is a lot closer to those 3 good teams than the 3 bad. And he's had 20-plus carries already 3 times this year. I think he sees a ton of work, and I think he's going to be very efficient against the Dallas defense.
You ever had pneumonia? It's just, I don't know if you've ever had pneumonia. I haven't. Ty, I don't know if you have or not, but where are you at with Jordan Mason this week? I am with Cameron. I do like him as a start of the week here, despite his recent struggles.
Yeah, Jordan Mason. We were very much. We had him up as like a running back 1. I forget what week it was.
It hasn't exactly by start of the week.
Yeah, there it is.
And then he didn't
just
before.
Want to remind you of that one. Like, it hasn't been like that since then. So the Cam curse actually kind of hit Jordan Mason at the wrong time. But there is no better time than right now. So yeah, definitely I would have full confidence again in Jordan Mason.
Ty, I'm going to come right back to you. We already talked about your running back start of the week very, very briefly. So how much more do you want to say on Kareem Hunt this week?
Why say many word when short word do trick? Workhorse behind good O-line against Vegas. Should we move on? Kareem Hunt, I'll just add in this. Kareem Hunt is the running back one in usage since taking over this backfield. Vegas is 7th, allowing the 7th most yards per carry, 10th most rushing yards per game on the year. Again, I think it's pretty obvious. It's pretty apparent. You probably already were. But for as much as I like Jordan Mason, sorry, Cam, I like Kareem Hunt a little bit more this week.
Ooh, I like that Kareem Hunt
Really?
over Jordan Mason this week. I think I would still play
It's hard
Jordan
to blame you, though.
I mean, all right. So I think I would still prefer Jordan Mason, but when you see Kareem Hunt is getting 27 and 22 carries, I mean, what does that tell you going into a matchup against the Raiders, who, you're right, Ty, are just absolutely putrid against the run? I mean, this is a smash spot here for Kareem Hunt. He is locked and loaded as a running back one in your lineups this week. How high would you put him in your rankings this week, Cameron?
I mean, we talked about it last week. He's got to be locked in top 12 pretty much every single week, as long as he's the starting running back. And now you add in the fact, he had 1 touchdown week 5, 2 last week. The odds that he has at least 1 touchdown, have got to be higher than they are that he has 0. He feels like a guy who could easily have 2 in this game. So yeah, I got to say he's probably pushing top 10 at least this week against Vegas.
I'll just say he's my running back 9 on the week. So
he is a top 10 running back for you this week. I do think Kareem Hunt is if he's not running back 10 or higher, he's going to be running back 11 or 12 for me this week. I got to finalize my rankings before Thursday Night Football here as we're recording Wednesday afternoon. Running back that I absolutely love this week, Javonte Williams against the Carolina Panthers. This Carolina Panthers defense couldn't stop a nosebleed right now. Okay, not to use the famous Bart Scott quote, but they have allowed the most fantasy points per game to running backs. They have given up the most rushing yards to running backs this year. They have given up 13 rushing touchdowns. That is 4 more than the next closest team in the entire league. Javonte's coming off a season-best performance against the New Orleans Saints on Thursday Night Football last week as well. 14 attempts for 88 yards, 2 scores, good for 26 fantasy points, and a running back 5 finish on the week. And I got to imagine, if you are Sean Payton, why are you even considering putting the ball into Bo Nix's hands in this game when you have a defense a defense in the Carolina Panthers that can't stop anybody right now, but also a Carolina Panthers offense that's going to be mightily struggling with Bryce Young at quarterback this week. So I got to imagine this is just another ginormous week for Javonte Williams. I know he's still ceding some work to Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, but it's like 10 to 15 snaps, if that not 10 to 15 snaps. It's like 10 touches a game. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Javonte Williams get like a 17, 18, 19 touch workload this week, or rush attempt workload this week, because this Panthers defense is just absolutely abysmal.
Yeah, if you forgot how bad they were with Bryce Young, week 1 they lost 47-10 to the Saints, who have lost 5 straight now. And then in week 2, they lost 26-3 to the Chargers, who couldn't put up any points in the Cardinals last week. All right, the Broncos are going to be able to move the ball pretty well. They're going to put up a lot of points. And so, yeah, Javonte is just going to have crazy, insane volume all day long. He's going to be efficient, and he's going to have tons of red zone opportunities.
Ty, how high is Javonte in your rankings this week?
Great question. I believe he's my running back 18 on the week.
Ooh, get him up higher. Against the Panthers.
Well, I've got Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, that's as high as I could go.
Are all those guys below Kareem Hunt for you?
Correct.
Oh, Tyler.
So that's what's surprising to me about this is I'm not saying Javonte Williams and Kareem Hunt are in the same tier, but wow, they're that far apart for you. I think Javonte Williams is borderline top 15 play this week.
I think what makes the difference for me is he's gotten some games where he's gotten 5 catches, 5 targets, 6 targets even. Not sure that happens this week.
Sure.
If we get what we saw last week against New Orleans, right? If he can turn 14 carries into almost 90 yards and score twice again, then he absolutely can kind of be in that same tier. I just don't think it's nearly I don't know. You can come with all the reasons. That's the kind of performance that you're expecting, or that you would need for him to kind of be in that tier for me.
Which is completely fair. I'm not saying he's going to
possible too.
Right. I'm not saying he's going to replicate last week, but when you play the Carolina Panthers, sky's the absolute limit. Like overall running back one is within your range of outcomes, even if your name is Rachaad White. Let's move on to our running back sits of the week here, fellas. Cameron, I'll start with you. Who are you sitting at the running back position?
I am sitting Tony Pollard, who is also my sell of the week. And the biggest reason is that he plays the Detroit Lions, who right now are the third best team against the run. They've only given up 80 yards twice to running backs this season, once to Aaron Jones and once to Kenneth Walker. The biggest difference between Tony Pollard and Aaron Jones and Kenneth Walker is that Tony Pollard's quarterback is either Mason Rudolph or Will Levis. They aren't going to take pressure off of Tony Pollard. There is no reason that the Detroit Lions should ever not have 8 men in the box this week. There is no reason you should ever be, I don't know, because it's Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd now. They don't even have D-Hop anymore to help alleviate any pressure. So I just don't have any faith that the Lions aren't going to sell it on the run, and they've been so good against the run already that I just am not confident at all in Tony Pollard, even though he's been pretty decent to start the season.
Yeah, I kind of don't care that Aiden Hutchinson is out. Go ahead, let Mason Rudolph beat you. I'd 95% chance Mason Rudolph doesn't beat you, and that might even be too low. Ty, Tony Pollard's also kind of been your guy. You were much more of a you were much more in favorite
over the entirety of the pod. He means not just this season.
right. But you were also like the most pro Tony Pollard this offseason as well. How do you feel about sort of the week for Tony Pollard?
Yeah, I would have to agree here. I mean, sure. the beauty of having no teams on bye this week is that you've got almost every single team starting running back up this week. So like you can choose 24 running backs over Tony Pollard this week, and it makes sense.
I'll kick it right back to you, Ty. Who's your running back sit of the week?
Chuba Hubbard, Cam's favorite running back, Chuba Hubbard. So this one can backfire just because Chuba still has been performing decently well, despite this team getting blown out in almost 4 straight games at this point. I shouldn't say almost 4 straight games. But this Carolina offense is just a massive risk right now, and you just don't know what you're going to get out of them week to week, and especially now with Bryce Young under center. This Denver matchup, though, is very, very rough. Like, I would not be surprised if Denver is selling out to just take away the run, because they're just going to, let Bryce Young beat them. Over the last 4 weeks, Denver is allowing the 6th lowest yards per carry and the 9th lowest rushing yards per game. I'm just expecting a very similar game to this past Sunday against Washington, where he still could get 17, 18 carries. I just don't think that they're going to go anywhere.
Shout out to the Denver Broncos for proving me wrong. I originally said they didn't improve their defensive line, which I knew they made additions, but wasn't panning out. Here they are, selling out against the run, finally living up to their free agent moves this offseason. Yeah, Chuba Hubbard's a fascinating one, Cameron. Is he still the start for you, or are you kind of with Ty here that you just rather wouldn't play him if you have other options?
I'm with Ty here, right? I mean, and it's crazy to say he's been the running back 2 over the last 4 weeks, averaging 18.8 points per game. Well, Andy Dalton's been the starting quarterback. In those first 2 weeks with Bryce Young, he averaged 6.5 and was the running back 41. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little more similar this week to week 1, because just like I talked about with Tony Pollard, why would Denver even worry about Bryce Young throwing the ball? It's if Bryce Young beats you, Bryce Young, you tip your cap, because it's happened like twice in his entire career. So yeah, I'm not worried about Bryce Young beating me. I'm going to sell it against Chuba Hubba if I'm the Denver Broncos.
Chuba Hubba, a whole new kind of bubble. I'm going to move on to my running back sit of the week. Nicholas Jamal Chubb is my running back sit of the week. I feel like this is somewhat low-hanging fruit. But I still want to talk about Nick Chubb because Tampa Bay's running backs did put up points against the Ravens last week, but it all came through the air. Like Rachaad White caught 7 passes for 61 yards last week. I mean, a little bit of a bounce back, but it came through the air. And I don't think Nick Chubb is catching passes out of this Browns backfield, despite being without Amari Cooper. Baltimore on the season, they're still allowing the second fewest rushing yards to running backs. They are being run on at the third lowest rate in the league. Nick Chubb did get 11 carries in his return. He did lead this Cleveland Browns backfield without Jerome Ford. But he only came up with 22 yards on those 11 carries. So with no Amari Cooper, I think teams are just going to find it so much easier to sell out on the Cleveland Browns run game. Go ahead. Let Jameis Winston beat you by throwing the ball to David Njoku, who we all like, Jerry Jeudy, who Cameron still has some hope in at this point. I'm kind of mailed it in on any of my Jerry Jeudy optimism. And then Cedric Tillman, go ahead. Let the crustacean king beat you and sell out against the run. So that's where I'm at with Nick Chubb. I'm not even considering firing him up this week as a running back 2 or a flex play. He's just not even on my radar.
Yeah, it's sad because I mean there was that glimmer of hope that he's just going to come back and he's going to beat all the odds. He's going to be awesome right away. And it's just he's a 20-year-old running back who had a horrific knee injury. Like that's just the state of it is. And I mean, as we all know, the thing he's got going for him is that these AFC North matchups always hit the over. They're always high scoring. There's never any. I'm just kidding. It is always defensive. There is no scoring, and now it's Jameis Winston running the ship. But I mean, it's probably better than Deshaun Watson. But I'm not expecting a lot of points in this one. And if he doesn't score a touchdown, right, this has been the case throughout his entire career. You're not excited for fantasy wise, and I don't really expect Cleveland to score much at all this week.
Where are you at with Nick Chubb, Ty?
Sit him for sure. I just want to see a week where he is the majority share of carries.
Yeah.
Carries and snaps, I should say, not just carries, snaps as well. Like I want to know that he is either 1A or clear lead before I throw him into a lineup.
Yeah, that was the thing. Pierre Strong Jr. played a way more snaps last week, but it was Nick Chubb who got the carries. Jerome Ford, as of this recording on Wednesday, did not practice. So TBD on if we do get Jerome Ford back this week. Obviously, if Jerome Ford plays, obviously you're far less interested in Nick Chubb then. But even without Jerome Ford, all three of us would be sitting him. Let's take a quick break here, fellas. Here from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy, and we will be back with more starts and sits. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back.
Yeah,
we talked about our quarterback and running back starts and sits of the week. If you go back and listen to our last 4 episodes, Cameron's a little salty. I didn't even try and steal his. We're back, but apparently I did. My brain was mush when we recorded on Monday, man. I had MC'd a conference all weekend. I was like, you probably heard it in my voice. I think I was talking like this, like most of the podcast. I was probably the worst person to listen to on the podcast that day. It was probably a rough listen if you had to listen to me talk. I mean, I'm always a rough listen. Who am I kidding? Wide receiver starts of the week here, fellas. Cameron, I'll let you start us off. Who's your wide receiver start of the week?
Darnell Mooney. We're getting down and dirty with this.
Yes.
Last time he played the Bucs, 9 catches on 16 targets, 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. Do I think that happens again?
Yes.
Absolutely not. However, I do think that he's going to be utilized in this game because he's been utilized in this offense since week 2. 7 targets, 8 targets, 6 targets, 16 targets, 5 and 8 targets. Since week 2, he's the wide receiver 11, averaging 14.6 points per game. I will say he's a wide receiver 16 in fantasy points per game. But this offense uses Darnell Mooney. He is their clear wide receiver too. And, they're using him across the field. Kyle Pitts and Drake London are not like Darnell Mooney. He is unique compared to those two, right? Those are the bigger bodies. They're supposed to be good at the catch point. One of them for sure is. The other we're still figuring out if Kyle Pitts is or not. But Darnell Mooney is being used in this offense. He's going to, in another plus matchup. I like Kirk. I like Darnell this week. I'm willing to fire him up as a top 24 option.
Ooh, I was going to ask how high would you go with Darnell Mooney? Because I do agree. I like Darnell Mooney in a spot start this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know if I'd be willing to go as high as 24, but I'd be willing to play him over Chuba. I'd be willing to play him. I mean, obviously over Nick Chubb. I'd be willing to play Darnell Mooney this week if I'm at a pinch and need someone in my lineup. Darnell Mooney might be one of the first guys I'm looking at. Ty, you're like in disbelief right now.
I wanted to just say, you guys are unbelievable. Cam first. Top 24?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. Terry McLaurin or what's his face that we're talking about? Darnell Mooney.
Terry.
Against the Bears?
But
with
still,
probably no Jaden Daniels? Darnell Mooney. Tank Dell or Darnell Mooney?
I would play Darnell.
We'll just put up a goose egg last week.
Hold on. That's because CJ Stroud threw for less than 100 yards. He's getting Indy this week.
He put up a goose egg.
What's the story been for Tank Dell all year?
Yeah.
There's no Nico.
Marvin Harrison or Darnell Mooney?
Oh, I think I'm still playing. I think I'm still playing Marv personally.
Yes.
I don't know.
Just like you're still playing Terry.
Diontae Johnson or Darnell Mooney?
Mooney. Hands down. Mooney.
Jawan Jennings or Darnell Mooney?
Jawan Jennings.
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Jordan
Addison.
Move on.
Yeah. No, I'm right.
We're going to disagree on this one.
Sign him up.
Oh, gosh.
I'm with you. I mean, so the problem is a lot of the guys that you were listing off are guys who have been struggling to provide relevancy as of recent. You get a handful of games where it's like, oh yeah, you get like 8 to 12 points out of them. But this is a game where Mooney could come out and give you 16 fantasy points this week. And if I'm looking to play upside, I'm looking to play Darnell Mooney in this matchup. You're very adamant about just being against us on this one, Ty.
You guys are just throwing this out very nonchalantly. Like this is a pretty straightforward case, and I just don't see it that way. That's all.
Just like saying Patrick Mahomes is cuttable, and then they go out and trade for DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay, that one. Okay, that
low
I
blow.
Hated to back that one up. Okay, but here's the thing: Darnell Mooney, yeah, he had 17.8, 14.6 in weeks 2 and 3. Then he had 31 against Tampa in week 5. But the 3 other games, 8.6, 6.8, 9.6. We have to at least acknowledge that there is a low floor with Darnell.
No, I will bet you a Kaniak combo that he scores 14 plus fantasy points this week, which was the average of the wide receiver 24 on the week for the last 4 weeks in a row.
Deal.
All right.
I love this.
Deal.
We need a drop. We need a drop.
We need like a Kaniak drop, like a Kaniak bet drop.
I'm with Cameron on this one. I think Darnell Mooney gives you 15 plus.
Guys, unbelievable.
Darnell.
I'll go as far to say that Tyler Algier will outscore Darnell Mooney.
Brutal.
We're just trying to swing the pendulum back a little bit with that one, but
I don't disagree though, Ty. I'm not going to sit here and say like Darnell Mooney is the most reliable fantasy asset in the entire world. But this is a week where I'm willing to spot start him in the right matchup. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. Could he be top 24? Maybe. I'm not ranking him as a top 24 guy, but I like him as a start this week if you need him in your flex spot. Go ahead, Ty. You can make your case now on your wide receiver start of the week. We've gone back and forth with you enough. You can go ahead and make your case.
Who was it? Was it Javonte? Was it Nick Chubb that you talked about, Lucas, as low hanging fruit?
Nick Chubb.
I'm pretty sure I take the cake here for low hanging fruit because I've got Amari Cooper as my wide receiver start of the week. I know. Yeah, boo me all you want. back to what I said about D-Hop, the man, Amari played only 35% of snaps, finished as the wide receiver 14. Now, those are not correlated in any kind of way. We're not going to see a higher finish because he plays more snaps this week. That being said, though, he could finish higher than the wide receiver 14 this week. Seattle's defense is back to full health now. They were going through some defensive line health issues a couple of weeks ago. They're back to full health, but they're still allowing the 12th most receiving yards per game the last 3 weeks. I'm just expecting Amari Cooper and Josh Allen to continue kind of building on what they had last week. So yeah, fire up Amari Cooper this week.
Yeah, I'm good with Amari Cooper this week. I think you can throw him back into your lineup as a reliable option as Cameron is giggling to himself a little bit. What are you giggling about?
Can't wait to hear this one.
I thought we transitioned to sits. You were like saying Amari Cooper's low-hanging fruit, and you start going through your argument. I'm like, you're arguing it for me a start, and then I realized, oh, we're still on starts right now. I was like, the whole time I was so confused. You're like, I got the low-hanging fruit here. I'm like, this isn't low. Like, I was like, I don't want to correct you right now, but this is
pretty
awful.
hot right now.
And then I realized I was the one that's in the wrong. No, I agree. I mean, he's the wide receiver 1 now for Buffalo. You got to fire him up the rest of the season.
My wide receiver start of the week had a great week last week. I'm expecting him to continue his success this week. George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know it hasn't provided you a ton of reliability, but he did give you 22 last week against the Jets. He racked up 149 air yards, which was the second most of all wide receivers last week. And what we saw in this game is that Russ is willing to push the ball down the field. Justin Fields throws laser beams versus Russell Wilson. He's willing to put a bit more air underneath it and take some shots to George Pickens. So that opens up a new avenue for big play opportunities for a guy like George Pickens. And you look at the matchup with the Giants, they have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers this year. This is a game where if Russell Wilson is going to come out and continue to cook, I know it is a disgusting primetime game, but if they come out and keep putting the ball in Russ's hands, only good things can happen for George Pickens here going forward. So I love George Pickens this week. I do think he actually, it feels weird to say, I think he might have gained a bit more reliability with Russell Wilson as his starting quarterback now.
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember, like last year, Russ threw 26 passing touchdowns. It felt gross, but he was a decent enough quarterback where you give him a guy like George Pickens, and I think he can make something happen. We saw Pickett's snap share go back up again. He was at 59, 67%. And then last week, he's playing 80% again, showing Pittsburgh, he's kind of back in the good graces of Mike Tomlin. 11, 7, 8, 9 targets the last 4 weeks. I think we're going to see some more stability from George Pickens. I'm not saying there's not going to be any variability. I think there's always going to be variability with him. But like you said, he's playing the Giants. Yeah, I'd fire him up this week for sure.
Where are you at with George Pickens, Ty? How high is he in your rankings?
Ooh, another good question. Pickens is my wide receiver 24. I've got him as a top 24 wide receiver. See, that makes sense compared to Darnell Mooney.
I would play Pickens over Mooney this week. That's very
absolutely.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop. Hey, I like Darnell Mooney this week, but George Pickens over Mooney. That's a no-brainer.
Is it?
Yes.
He's just instigating now. Fire up George Pickens this week. The matchup is there. Somehow it is an upgrade with Russ at quarterback, despite the Steelers having a 4-2 record with Justin Fields. Russ is going to be the guy under center here for the Steelers. So if that's the case, you can go ahead and fire up George Pickens this week on prime time. Let's talk quarterback wide receiver sits of the week here, fellas. We're going to go all the way back to quarterbacks now. Cameron, who's your wide receiver sit?
It's Terry McLaurin. I'm not planning on Jaden Daniels playing this week. Washington's already come out and said we're going to be ultra conservative with him, but even if he does play, even if Daniels does play this week, I don't think they're going to want him running out of the pocket much, which is how he gets some of those bigger plays, which is the biggest part of, his game, which leads me to believe, right, you don't want him kind of run out of the pocket. You don't want the best part of his game out there. You're probably not going to start him. That's just my 2 cents on Jaden Daniels. But even if he is starting, Nico Collins is the only wide receiver so far this season with over 13 fantasy points against the Bears, PPR fantasy points. which I thought was pretty wild. The next two closest, which I thought was funny, is Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell. Other than those three,
Right.
nobody else is over 10 fantasy points against the Bears so far this season. I don't trust him with Marcus Mariota. This Bears defense has been very good against the pass. And even if it is Jaden Daniels, I think it's not a plus matchup. I just don't really want to have Terry in my lineup this week.
Yeah, if the Commanders are going to be conservative with getting Jaden Daniels back, which I think is the right approach. When we saw him kind of ragdolling himself around at LSU, I got a feeling it's going to be Marcus Mariota this week. And you're right. The Bears defense isn't one that I want to target in this matchup with Marcus Mariota at quarterback and Terry McLaurin out wide. You might be forced into playing Terry McLaurin this week. Ty, where do you stand on Terry McLaurin?
Well, if we look at it from the lens of Jaden Daniels playing, I think there's even more of a reason to keep him in your lineup, even though it may not be as good as it has been the past couple of weeks. I mean, Terry's top 15 in target share. He's top 5 in air yards. Like, Terry is still being utilized downfield. So even if Jaden isn't exactly like the most mobile, I still think that they're going to try to take their shots just because you kind of have to. Like, you can't just completely change your game plan against Chicago. That being said, though, if he plays with Marcus Mariota, it gets tough. It gets real tough to kind of keep him in your lineup then.
I'll come right back to you. Who else is tough to keep in your lineup this week for wide receivers, Ty?
Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah.
Bold
here.
Yep.
Bold.
Yep.
It's not been great for Marv. Like, I think over the past 3 weeks, like, the concussion didn't help in week 6, but putting up only 3.6, 2.1 in week 5 and week 7, respectively, like, Marv it should have been a guy that we talked about in previous kind of trending or ending episodes.
Yeah.
Now he gets Miami. Miami's going to not only be flying around because they've got Tua back, so they're going to be just hyped up to the nth degree. They are the league's best passing defense this year. They're allowing the lowest amount of passing / receiving yards per game this year. So honestly, he's kind of in the same boat as Terry, where like you're probably going to have to keep him in your lineup just on the chance that like he hauls in a 30-yard touchdown or something and he kind of like saves his week that way. But you really got to lower your expectations if the past 3 weeks haven't done so already.
Yeah, I don't know if you're able to flat out sit Marv. Just because I'm still a believer in the talent, and I know there's a ton of discourse going around on Twitter right now about, is it actually Malik Neighbors, then Brian Thomas, and then Marv for this? Like, I'm not throwing in the towel on Marv yet, but you bring up a very valid point, Ty, where Marv has just as many games. If you take out his week 6 concussion, he has just as many games where he finishes outside of the top 50 wide receivers as he does inside of the top 30. I mean, he only has 2 finishes inside of the top 24 wide receivers this year. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and, see how bold you can be this week, you can go ahead and sit Marv if you really want to try and flex on your league mates a little bit. I don't know if I have the bravery to do it, but yeah, this Miami Dolphins passing defense is no joke. Fewest fantasy points per game allowed to the position this year. I don't want to ask, are you willing to sit Marv this week, Cam? But how low do expectations need to be?
They got to be lowered. The thing with Marv is you got to hope for a big play this week. You got to hope for a long touchdown. That's what it's going to come down to. He's yet to have over 5 receptions in a game. He's got a catch rate that's lower than 50% right now. He has 1 game over 65 receiving yards. So if he doesn't get a big play touchdown, you're left with 2 weeks like we've just seen where it was 5 points and 5 points. So yeah, it just, I gotta agree with Ty here. I think he might be a sit if you, right. It depends who your wide receivers are.
Totally.
That's what it's going to come down to. If you've got a guy though, if you got 3 top 25 wide receivers and Marv, which congrats, that's awesome. I think he's a sit then.
Yeah. If you can have your decision made for you, I feel like you should be able to exercise that freedom that you have earned yourself. Oh, and Ty is just in disgust now. Go ahead. You're going to lose the thought if I don't transition to you right now.
So Is it just me, or is Arizona feel like one of the biggest underachievers on offense this year?
By far.
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Kyler currently has less than 10 yards per attempt on deep passes this year. He's 28th of all quarterbacks. They don't push the ball downfield. That's the issue. Marv's good games this year have been when they take shots downfield to him. Again, we're not going to go as far to say like you're going to sit Marv, but gosh darn it, there's a lot working against Marv in this match.
Yeah. I mean, Rashad Bateman has more fantasy points per game right now than Marvin Harrison. So,
no
tell you all you need to know. Yes, sir.
no.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So does Khalil Shakir.
Man,
I'm having a conversation about Marv.
Xavier Worthy has the same amount of points per game as Marv. So,
Xavier Worthy's the better NFL prospect. Then that means.
Yep. Marv should have just been a 7th rounder at that point.
Yeah, right.
100%.
Jeez, Marv.
I agree.
I'll wrap it up here. I talked about how the Dolphins were allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this year. The Denver Broncos are allowing the second fewest, which means Diontae Johnson is also a sit this week. Look, it hasn't been great. It wasn't great last week. The train has been progressively getting off the rails with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And in this matchup, you are getting the Pat Surtain treatment. You are going to get Patrick Surtain on Diontae Johnson, who has been locked down all year. Denver has also allowed the 8th fewest receiving yards to wide receivers, and they've only allowed 2 receiving touchdowns. You'll also notice now on the screen, I have thrown clips of Bryce Young on there because let this serve as a reminder that Bryce Young is Diontae Johnson's quarterback this week. So I that's enough for me to say, you know what, Diontae, you can probably find a seat on my bench this week. I'd play Darnell Mooney over Diontae Johnson this week.
Yeah, and even if you're like, you know what, maybe Pat Surtain doesn't play, maybe they hold him out or something like that. They've given up 33 points in the last 2 weeks without Surtain, and now they play Bryce Young. 33 points combined. Yeah. Right. Carolina's not going to score at all. That's what I'm trying to say. I almost said Denver's not going to score, but they're going to score against Carolina. Carolina's not going to score. Deontay's going to have a rough week. Yeah, I don't think he can even be a top 30 option this week. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, Pat Surtain sounds like he's progressing through protocol, but there it sounds like people are optimistic that he is going to be back in this game. If he isn't, yeah. I'm still not optimistic for Diontae Johnson.
No, that's what I'm saying. The defense has been good without him too, and if he plays, then it's just a no-go for sure.
Yeah. What are you at, Ty? You're looking intently at your computer.
Is this potentially like coaching malpractice from Dave Canales with Diontae Johnson this year? Obviously, Diontae can get open anywhere on the field. Like, it doesn't matter where he lines up, he will get open. The dude has only totaled 61 total snaps from the slot this year.
Really?
Yeah. And he's played 336. That's 18% of his snaps from the slot. Yeah. So remember when they said, like, we're going to get Diontae the ball in any way that we can. We're going to use him all over the formation. Liar. You're not. You're just exclusively sending him out wide. And if Pat Surtain plays this week, Pat Surtain is most definitely going to shadow him then.
Yeah, not looking great for Diontae Johnson this week. Let's bring this episode home here with the tight ends, fellas. Everyone's favorite segment of the week. Which tight end dart do I throw? Cameron, we'll start with you here. Give us a brief overview of your disgusting tight end start of the week that I unfortunately agree with.
It's K. Dotton, and I don't even know if we can call him a dart throw right now. Tight end 4.
Gotta play his sound.
But I think he might be outgrowing it. Tight end 4 since week 4, averaging over 7 targets a game in that time frame. You got no Mike Evans or Chris Godwin this week. You got no Chris Godwin rest of the season. He's going to continue to see volume. We might not like it, but he is. And, just being the tight end 4 over that stretch, he's, top 10 on the season. I lied. He's top 13 on the season. He's almost top 10. You're almost there, Kate.
Almost there, buddy.
But you're not quite. After this week, you got that. You'll get there. But Yeah, I'm all in on K-Dot this week. I think he's got to be a top 10 option for sure, at least, especially with the way tight ends are.
Yeah, with the way tight ends are, golly, I'd be willing to play K-Dot this week if I'm streaming tight ends. You're not in your head in agreement, Ty.
My tight end 12 on the week. Look, what have we said all year about tight ends?
They stink.
They stink for sure, but chase the volume.
Yeah.
K-Dot should be getting volume this week.
Yeah.
Should he not? I mean, it's pretty straightforward for me, at least.
Yeah. Let's transition to your tight end start then, Ty. Because speaking of volume, this guy's been getting it.
Hunter Henry. We are so back. I know. I've mentioned this once or twice. I am known to have some gross tight end starts. But the thing is with Hunter Henry, it really hasn't been gross the last 2 weeks with Drake May. He's gone for 13.1 and 17.2. Now, Henry did go for just 2.9 against the Jets in their first matchup in week 3.
When you called him a start.
When I did call him a start, that is true. So it's a little bit of a redemption arc here. That being said, though, I do want to kind of jog the memory a little bit here. Who did well for New England in that game? Nobody.
Well, yeah. But that could happen again. It is New England.
It is New England.
It's New England. But thing is, Jacoby Brissett was pressured, or under pressure at least, on 52% of his dropbacks in that game. I don't think Drake May is going to be under duress as much as Brissett was. Could he? Absolutely. Because, again, it's New England. But that being said, Hunter Henry seems to be, I don't want to say his favorite target because it was Demario Douglas in his first start. And then it was Hunter Henry this past week. But Hunter Henry is definitely involved in this New England offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you can fire up Hunter Henry this week. He's been reliable. He's been Drake May's go-to guy. Cameron is in agreement with the double thumbs up. Mine isn't necessarily a gross dart throw by any means, but I just want to give a quick round of applause to the Rams, or not the Rams, the Atlanta Falcons coaching staff for figuring it out with Kyle Pitts, man. I mean, here we go. Over the last few weeks, he has scored double-digit fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. He has caught 7 passes in 2 of his last 3 games. He's been targeted 8+ times in 2 of his last 3 games. He has caught at least 65 receiving yards in those games. He has finished as the tight end 6, the tight end 13, and the tight end 10. Now he gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who over the last 4 weeks have been giving up the 2nd most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So Kyle Pitts, for me, originally you're like, man, I got duped again. But honestly, I think this coaching staff is starting to figure it out, where Drake London is the clear alpha. And you know what? We got to start getting Kyle Pitts involved because he can actually do something with the ball in his hands. So go ahead, fire Kyle Pitts this week. I think you can have confidence in him.
Yeah, he's starting to look like the guy I was really hoping he was going to look like when I called my flag plant. I'm getting a little excited again. We've seen kind of this reemergence from some of these guys. Kyle Pitts turning it on lately. Mark Andrews turning it on lately. So it's good to see. And I agree. He's got to be in your lineup now. Unless you're somehow have a top, George Kittle or Brock Bowers.
Totally. Let's do a quick breeze through of the tight end sits of the week. Cam, I'll just come right back to you. Who's your tight end set?
Isaiah Likely. Browns are allowing 5 points per game to tight ends this season. Mark Andrews is kind of coming back into the fold. And since week 2, he's the tight end 21, averaging 5.7 points per game. So he pretty much has had one good game this entire season, and that is it. And so, yeah, I have no interest in Isaiah Likely. But if you want to know how bad the rest of the tight ends are, he's averaged 5.7 for the last 5 weeks, and he is still the tight end 8 on the season.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. Why do the tight ends stink this year? Ty, who are you? Golly, and your name is... Oh, boy. Yeah, go ahead. Maybe we need to spend a minute on this tight end.
Sam Laporta. Yeah, you need to bench him. Even with Jameson Williams suspended. It's not official yet. He should be, though, by Sunday. You still should not play Sam Laporta, okay? What's the one thing we know about Detroit so far this year? Doesn't matter who they play. They are going to run the ball. And then when they go into the passing game, they're looking to their wide receivers. They're not really looking for a Sam Laporta. Here's a wild stat for you, courtesy of Kyle Yates over on Twitter. Sam Laporta has just 17 targets in 6 games this year.
Oh,
you want to know some names of tight ends that have more than Sam Laporta this year?
No.
Johnny Munt has 17.
Oh, no, Johnny Munt. Minnesota Vikings' very own Johnny Munt.
Correct.
Oh.
Jordan Atkins, Cleveland Browns. Jatavion Sanders of the Carolina Panthers has more than Sam Laporta.
Love Jatavion Sanders.
And the best one, Evan Ingram has 19 targets this year in just 3 games. So in half the amount of games of Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram has more targets in it. There is no reason to keep Laporta in your lineups anymore.
I have heard people say, like, hey, you know what? Without JMO, look for Laporta to get more involved, which I don't think is like a necessarily incorrect conclusion. But the problem is what happened last week when Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta drew the same amount of targets and they both didn't perform. And it was only 2 targets apiece, right? Like, how much pie are we expecting to go to Laporta here when Jameson Williams hasn't been playing like his, first 2-3 weeks self? So I think if you got options, I think you can look to sit Laporta until he gives you a reason to play him, which, I can't believe people wasted a 2nd-round pick on him. I'm glad we were anti-Laporta this offseason. My tight end sit of the week, Pat Freiermuth. If he's your starting tight end, you can get him out of your lineup. The thing with Pat Freiermuth is the Giants have quietly been bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to tight ends this year. Over the last 4 weeks, they have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. We saw a nice little game from Pat Freiermuth last week, but I'm just not expecting that to continue against the New York Football Giants. So I just would look to stream other options other than Pat Freiermuth. I don't think he's going to give you enough upside this week against a team that has been relatively good against the tight end position this year.
Agreed.
And 25th in targets per route run.
Oh, there we go. Nail in the coffin. If you want help making more start-sit decisions this week, make sure you join our Discord. We will link that in the pinned comment down below if you're watching over on YouTube. We also have it in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video that you are watching. So we have a whole channel over there dedicated to starts and sits, a whole community that is very active over there. We are up to nearly 3,800 people who are daily engaging with one another over in our Discord. So if you want more fantasy football advice, more fantasy football interactions, head over to our Discord. You will not regret it. We'll be back next week. We're going to switch up the early week episode. We got some fun new episodes coming for you all over the next 4 or 5 weeks here as we get deeper into the season now. We'll still have our trade targets and our starts and sits every single week. Don't you worry. But as the season progresses, we're going to start mixing up content a little bit more now that we are well underway. We're going to start getting a little bit more, we start looking into the future a little bit more versus at the start of the season. It's about building a strong foundation for your team. So in future weeks, we're going to start looking ahead to rest of season potential outcomes, rest of season schedules, rest of season trade targets, everything of the sort. So make sure you subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you know when all of our newest videos are up and you can get that content as soon as it's out. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, CamLaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler_Plath for Ty. You can follow the fellas socials as well. FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Appreciate you. We will see you all next time. Deuces.